I should have known. Last night when I was putting the finishing touches on, I was making sure to add. I got like 3 pages of notes. I got like one thing done. Whenever I make sure to, I was worried that I didn't have enough notes. But only for a second. So what did I do? I made more notes. And then I didn't worry about it anymore. See, that's a perfect example. I don't know how far we're going to get each teaching, so I try to make sure we have enough. And so I will have that thought for a second, or concern, not so much a worry, concern, do I have enough ready to go? And you know what I do to mitigate that worry? I make sure I have more than I need. You know? And so this is now the Afterburn. So we're going to start the Afterburn. So if you have comments or questions and you're online, Mandy will be making note of those. If you're here, you can go ahead and sort of raise your hand and just, well, if you speak it, I'll just repeat it. We're not going to bring around a mic, but if you have something to say, we can do it that way. Anybody here have anything? Nope. You do? Marty does. Amen. Amen. Okay, so now let me kind of explain that to everybody, what you said. So, you know, that part in Matthew where it said to seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, that when he was walking in the Christian walk, that was a part that just, well, how do you do that? What does that even mean? What does it mean to seek first the kingdom and his righteousness? And he said that it was in Deuteronomy 6:25 that when he came into this walk, that it explained all that to him when it says, and it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all this command before Yahweh or Elohim as he has commanded us. There it is. There's your answer to Matthew chapter 6. What is the righteousness? It is righteous for us when we guard to do all this command. That is the righteousness. All right, so this is really important that you kind of can piece these things together. Yeah. Okay, so he said, but of course, as many of you may have tried to do, you know, he then shared it with some friends, and the friends are like, nah, that's Old Testament stuff. That's been done away. That was for them. That's not what it's talking about. And see, that's part of the reason why it is so insidious and such a problem when Christianity tries to tell you that the law and the Old Testament, all that was done away with, or dispensationally was for them and not for us, because now you don't know what to do with Matthew 6. Because the only verses that you have that explain righteousness and his kingdom is in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, in the Torah. So if you are, because people say, why are you so upset with this whole, because this makes it impossible truly to understand what Yeshua was talking about in the New Testament. And so then Marty said, well, then just put him back at square one if that were the case. You know, I discovered this thing and I share it with some people. They say, that's for them. They think, okay, but then I don't have an answer again. Now I'm back to square one. Now what do I do? What you need is a teacher. What you need to do, and I'm not picking on Marty, but this is what we all tend to do. You need to stop talking to people on the horizontal. You got to go up the line and ask questions. When you ask people on the horizontal, you're going to find out that they don't know any more than you know, and maybe less. It's like I didn't understand, and teachers used to say this in school. Why are you cheating off of the person next to you? What makes you so sure they know the answer? Because people look at the other person, you know, try to... And then the teachers always knew who cheated because they got the same wrong answers. I say, isn't it interesting that you guys got the same one wrong? And you're sitting next to each other. We got to be careful with that. Thank you, Marty. Good questions. Look, that is a really challenging piece of this, is that you're going to see things that the Messiah will teach and the apostles will teach that really there's no way to answer those questions and understand what they're talking about unless you go to the beginning. You go back to what they're referencing. They're referencing stuff that already existed in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament. Okay, Manny, you ready?
Billy Gillis wanted to say, Rabbi, I hope sometime I can tell you why this message was exactly what I needed to hear today. Yahweh's perfect timing. I have tears of joy in my eyes.
Thank you, Billy. I appreciate that. Also, just to help all of the people that you're having challenge with is, we will at some point coming up soon, so keep coming every week online. I will take questions in general in the future. We've done this already twice. We'll do it again. So I am planning to do a question, like a Q&A thing where we just sit here and answer questions, okay? So I know I mentioned a bunch of stuff that is peripheral to the teaching, but integral to your understanding of this teaching. That's why I referred you to teachings. Now, bear in mind, If you're going to ask me something that is answered in a teaching, Kurt will put it down, Rob will put it down, Manny will put it down. Trust me on this one. Or I didn't say trust me, believe me on this one, okay? If you asked me, I would send you to the teaching anyway, so asking me isn't going to make it any different. If they sent you to a teaching to understand something, if you ask me the same question, I'm going to do the same thing. Because a teaching that went 7, 8, 12, 15 parts to explain something is going to be much more useful to you than me trying to answer it in 3 or 4 minutes. All right, so just let them guide you to a teaching. Oh, but I don't know. I've never listened to anything 14, 30, and 50, whatever. Don't be intimidated by that. So now you're worried about how long it is. Don't worry about it. Listen to part 1. If it starts to work for you and you're getting something out of it, you may not be able to stop yourself from listening to part 2. And then you'll be really wanting to know what's happening next in part 3, and you'll just keep going. If you listen to part 1 and it's not working for you, fine, turn it off. I think that you'd be doing yourself a disservice. To really understand what's going on, you have to listen to the whole thing. But I promise you, if you're really seeking an answer, if you listen to part 1 of any of the teachings, you will want part 2. You will want part 3. As a matter of fact, you'll find yourself binge listening like you do with Netflix binge watching. And you'll find yourself having a hard time stopping because it's very, very compelling when you first start to understand and explore stuff that you were never understood before, or you maybe understood it incorrectly. All right, so if you're asking stuff that's not, integral or whatever the word would be, people say I make up words, and that's fine. I'm allowed to. I'm at the microphone. If you're asking something that's not specifically directly connected to this teaching, let them redirect you to teachings that cover it. One of my joys at this point, believe me, I was frustrated when we first started 8 years ago, when we started this ministry a second time. You all know the story, whatever. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. I was frustrated knowing people were going to be asking a bunch of questions I didn't have teachings for yet, or that I used to have teachings for that I needed to redo. But now we have almost all of the basic foundation already recorded and for free. And so I have joy in knowing, rather than having to spend hours explaining something to somebody, I say, here, go listen to this if you still have questions. By the way, if you still have questions after you listen, call us. It's okay. That's not a problem. Or email us and we'll find a way to address you. But listen to the teachings first. And by the way, don't tell me you listened to it and then ask a question that demonstrates clearly you didn't listen to it. Okay? But listen to it first. I will do the best I can in those teachings. I have done the best I can in those teachings to explain everything that you need to do verse by verse, better than I could probably do one-on-one with you talking. It's already in the teaching with the notes and with the organized structure of it. So when people ask me stuff, if there's a teaching, I tell you right now, even if it's private counseling, I'll say, go listen to the teaching first. The only time I will do something different than that is if it's urgent. If they need to know something right now for something happening right now, then I will answer their question right now. But if it's just something as part of their growth in their walk, etc., the teaching is the best way to go. Okay, Manny, go ahead. Hopefully that helped.
Yes, sir, it did. Absolutely. Thank you.
Because we do want to answer their questions. We do.
We do.
Okay?
And I know a lot of people are taking, right now, if I can mention this, a lot of people are asking still like Passover questions.
Like what?
Just, I don't know, I've got to go scroll up again, but they're asking random Passover questions about certain things, toothpaste and such.
Just go back to Passover Q&A part 1. That's where I deal with all the leaven stuff and all that kind of thing.
I was going to say, Marty created an incredible playlist, especially for this time.
Okay, so Rob and Kurt, somebody could just link that in there and post the playlist.
Awesome.
Okay. All right, now let's get to today's questions.
All righty.
And you need to stop worrying about Passover till next year. Okay?
Rabbi Tom had said something very beautifully. He said, don't worry about leaving the world. Think instead about getting the world out of us.
Good.
Beautifully said.
Beautifully said.
All right, Johnny has a question. Matthew 6:7. When praying, do not keep on babbling. What does this mean?
Okay, well, that had nothing to do with today's teaching. But I can answer the question. All right? Look, the point is that people tend to miss, I guess I can connect it to today's teaching. Your Father knows what you need. So you don't need to use a lot of words. You don't have to be impressive and try to impress anybody with a lot of words. When you go before your Father, He knows what you need without you even saying it. Just come forward and say, Father, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help with my finances. I need help with my health. I need help with, but He doesn't need a lot of words. It doesn't take the right magical way of expressing it, and there's no magic formula. Use the model prayer, which He gives you right here, in the chapter when He goes and tells you this is the simplicity of it. He says this is how you do it. He says you don't have to use a lot of words. It's a simple structure. Recognize who He is. Appreciate all the things that He's done. Forgive all those who have trespassed against you. Ask the forgiveness you need and ask for whatever you need. I mean, it's a very simple formula. The model prayer is right there. This then is the way you should pray, verse 9. But when it talks about, do not keep on babbling like the Gentiles, it says, look, you don't have to say a lot of stuff. What do we normally mean by babbling? Don't think charismatic. Don't think, tongues. Just think about when somebody's running on and on and on, we say, oh, you're babbling. All right? Right now, I'm starting to babble on this. Okay, starting to pick on that. Okay, this teaching starts in Matthew 26, chapter 6:24. Let's start and stay from there forward. And by the way, that question on chapter 6, verse 7 is in a teaching called, Master, Teach Us to Pray. All right? I'm sure I covered that verse in that teaching. So go listen to that. All right, go ahead.
Okay, being on 624, Olivia and Janet Hoffman want to know if, Rabbi, can you please elaborate on what Yeshua said, you are not able to serve Elohim and Mammon?
No, it's a very simple thing. We're not going to deal with what mammon is or not, and whether it's a metaphor as it is as a personification of wealth and stuff. The point is you can't serve two masters, Elohim and anything. And I think I started the teaching by explaining that, Janet. I mean, that's how I started. Go back and listen to the beginning. I explained that verse, okay? He's talking specifically here about verse 22 when it talks about, or even further back, the idea of laying up treasures in heaven, laying up treasures on the earth, etc., verse 19. He's talking about wealth to some degree, but the whole point here, metaphorically, is it's about you cannot have two hierarchies of priority. You are serving one or the other. Are you serving Elohim or are you serving your pursuit of wealth? Are you serving Elohim or are you pursuing some other thing? Whatever it is, you can't serve two. All right, next.
Israel Tracy wants to make sure she has the proper interpretation to your speaking in tongues. Pull head from Tukis and trust Abba.
I don't have any problem with the metaphor. I'm not sure that it has anything to do with speaking in tongues, but okay. Okay? I think people need to pull head from Tukis in general and just do things like he said. All right?
Amen to that. Selena Tom.
And I do appreciate your use of Yiddish.
Selena Stevenson says, I've had frequent traumas in the last few years. My response is often an emotionless readjusting. Is this a habit or coping mechanism or letting Yahweh sit on the throne? She often feels callous.
Well, look, I mean, there's the internal response, which I think you do correctly. There's also what people can perceive, and they do this with me all the time. They can perceive a lack of compassion or a lack of concern or a lack of that whatever emotion they're looking for because you don't respond with the emotional response that people think you should. So you could look and come across as callous or unloving or lacking compassion or lacking empathy and sympathy and those kind of things. So I try very carefully, as much as I can when I talk to people, say, look, I want you to know I understand and I have empathy and sympathy, but you need to let this go and not worry about it, whatever, and those kind of things. But it can come across that way. But it's not because internally there's a callousness necessarily. I mean, there can be, but it's because you have a coping mechanism and you've learned to let Yahweh say all of the above of what you said, and you've learned to adjust and accept these issues that you have had to deal with. So the internal part is correct, and for likely the reasons you gave, but it can come across to others observing it as lacking something, because people generally expect the emotional response. And they get frustrated with me about that all the time because I don't give that emotional response. And so they're then left to conclusion jump and to, come to a judgment as to why I'm responding the way I am. And so they often, as most people do, choose the most negative possible response. Well, he must be doing it because of, and they'll fill in the blank with something negative. Instead of we don't generally fill in the blank with something positive. You ever notice that? I mean, you're filling in a blank, why not just fill it with a positive? Well, he must be doing that because he's at peace and this doesn't bother him. See, why wouldn't you just do that? No, it's because he's an uncaring and blah, blah, blah. That's okay, That's judging. You're told not to judge. Okay, don't judge. All right, go ahead.
A lot of these are general questions, and there's not that many, so I'm hoping it's okay to ask.
Sure. We got a few minutes.
Pete and Brenda Lamb. Rabbi, in Jeremiah 17:8, is the message that worry tests our root structure and keeps us from producing good fruit?
Well, it's right before 17:9, which is really the problem. But all right, so 17:8 said, I knew 17:9, but I wasn't sure what 17:8 said. All right, so 17:8, for he shall be like a tree planted by the waters, which spreads out its roots by the river and does not see when heat comes, and his leaf shall be green, and in the year of drought he's not anxious, nor does he cease from yielding fruit. Yes, that's wonderful. But the problem is verse 9, but the heart is crooked, and above all is desperately sick. Who shall know it? There's the problem that causes you not to be able to have verse 8. It's funny, I really should have verse 8 in my head as much as verse 9, but verse 9 comes up all the time. I mean, it was like at the core of the heart of the matter teaching. So when you said 17, 8, and 9, you know what's really interesting also, and this is a side sort of note, when I was wanting to get mikvahd, when I wanted to get baptized, and I was in Worldwide Church of God, part of the way the pastor worked that is he would give you an assignment of some sort, all right? To sort of meditate on whatever. And he gave me that assignment. He said, I want you to kind of write a letter to Yahweh, well, whatever, not that you would ever submit it and show it to the pastor or anything, but just kind of as an understanding of what does it mean, Jeremiah 17:9, and 10, where he says, I search the heart and the kidneys, and I try them to see where you're at. Do you understand what that means? Before you go in the water, do you understand that he's going to look at you knowing that your heart is desperately sick and has its problems and is crooked, and that he's going to be testing and trying you. Are you ready for all that? I mean, it's just one of those exercises. So that's one of the reasons I've known this verse for a long time. But verse 8 is really a beautiful sort of verse that juxtaposes against the verse 9, which is, you're supposed to be like a tree planted by the waters, that you're not anxious in the year of the drought, you're not worried, but you're going to still produce fruit. Appreciate that, Pete. Go ahead. So Pete Lamb brought that up. Okay, what's next?
Okay, question from Elena. Does Rabbi have teachings on his views of free will about the total control of Yah?
I've covered it. I just don't know where. And this I can explain. It's very simple. Look, he has given us, and it says, and it's expressed almost everywhere in the Tanakh, as well as in the Brit, the free will to choose, because he wants to watch our choices. It's all about choice. Actually, it's in the teaching, making decisions, the reason you exist. That's probably where I cover it, okay? But I know that we have the predestination crowd and so there's no free will crowd. Look, he knows what you're going to do because time is not an issue for him. He sees the end and the beginning at the same time. So he already has seen you do it. Not because he can see into the future. He sees the future. He's not seeing into it. He's already seen you do it. He knows what you're going to do. That doesn't mean that he's predestined you so you have no choice. He just knows that he's already seen you make the choice. He knew Judas would make the choice. He knew Noach would make the choice to obey and build the ark. Yeshua picked the 12. He picked knowing the choices they would make if he picked those 12. But it's not that they had no choice. I was called to do this because he knew the way I would do this. Not that I had no choice to do this, but he knew if he chose me to do this, how I would do this. Does that make any sense? All right? By the way, that's probably something I need to add to my premarital dating stuff that I teach people. You need to pick somebody who you should know how they're going to make choices. I mean, if you're going to pick somebody, you should pick them having a real good idea how they make choices and what kind of choices they'll make once you get married. And then not be all surprised at the choices they make. Do you know them well enough to have a good sense of how they make choices? What kind of decisions, how they make decisions? Now, you can't see into the future the way Yahweh can, but still, you know, as far as dealing with choices. All right? All right, next question. And by the way, I'm sorry, I always do this to you, but the making decisions teaching is only one part for anybody wanting to be. Don't be nervous, it's only one part. And it's one of those teachings that I gave having only prepared for it the night before because I was kept up all night being basically made to make that teaching. That one I didn't have a choice. Actually, I did. I had a choice to ignore him and go to sleep, but he just kept disturbing my peace and pestering me until I got up to write down that teaching. So that teaching is one of those few teachings where I had something completely different planned for that Saturday, and he disturbed me to make that, got me up and woke me up, and I kept writing down things thinking, okay, that's it, went to lay down again until finally I was like, all right, do you just want me to get up and go to the office and actually write this out? And the answer I felt I got was yes, get up and go do it. Don't just try to, because I try to keep a pad and paper by the bed, so if he gives me something, if I just write it down so I don't forget it, he lets me go back to sleep. Because it's something I need for the future at some point, or it's just something to note down. Did not happen with that teaching. He just kept me up and kept me up and kept me up until I finally just got up and wrote it at 2, 3 in the morning. Well, actually, I got to figure if I woke up, it must have been 4 or 5 in the morning because don't go to bed until 2, 3 in the morning. So, but he just would not let me sleep. Anyway, go ahead.
Timothy has a question. He says, when faced with the decision of things like chemo and radiation, how can we know which is the right decision? Believe me, this can be a source of worry for some.
All right, go back to what I explained. There's a lot of factors that go into chemo, radiation, and choices to deal with cancer, etc. The key here is this, because these are hard decisions. The key thing is this: have peace with your decision. Because you can't undo it. If you choose your route, you choose your route. You're going to go naturopathic, you're going to go chemo and radiation. You can't undo the chemo and radiation. And you really can't undo if you miss the window of time that you should have done the chemo if you go to naturopathic route, if it doesn't happen to work. Own your decision, okay? I'll give you an example of how I brought some peace, not completely with my parents and my brothers, but with my mother specifically, over the whole vaccination issue. You gotta understand, I got a brother who's an orthopedic surgeon, his wife's a family practice doctor, and my mother takes them as experts and only listens to them. Of course, my mother also listens to whatever the government says to do about anything, okay? She's a very good citizen, gets her flu shot and everything else. Well, I had to say to them, I said, look, you have to understand, my choice to vaccinate or not vaccinate, not just scripturally mandated or not the right way to go, I said, this was not an easy choice. I said, it is scary either way. I said, you have to understand, I took it very seriously, and that there are worries and fears in vaccinating. There are also worries and fears in not vaccinating. And you know what? There was peace between us a lot more from that point forward when she realized that I did show that there's a concern. She thought I just had this callous disregard and I just, wasn't concerned about the choice. I said, no, I'm always aware, but then I have peace with my choice. I made a decision to not vaccinate. Okay, so I have peace with that. And I didn't need to get into scriptural arguments with her because she doesn't go by that anyway. All right? I mean, yes, I know somebody say, well, your mother's Jewish. Yes, but she's secular Jewish. Just like, like I say, a Christmas Easter Catholic is not doing anything either except once a year. She doesn't do very much. So this is not, I can't just say on the authority of Scripture because that won't mean anything. But what I could say was, look, I took this seriously. I had a worry thought about getting them vaccinated. I had a worry thought about not. And then I acted upon it, and then I had peace No more worry. I made a decision. I have peace with my decision. So that's the same thing with things like when you have doctors telling you we need to do this or that treatment, prayerfully consider it, get second opinions, get all your options in front of you, make a choice, live with your choice, have peace with your choice. It's the same thing I tell everybody. I use the funeral example because it's the same kind of moment. You have those moments that you don't get back. And it's okay, but I have to, at every funeral I've ever done, I said, look, this is the time when you get to stand up if you want and say something. You don't have to say anything, but I want you to be at peace with your choice. Don't come up and regret that you got up because you really didn't want to, but your family members pushed you to, and don't stay in your seat knowing you're going to regret later that you didn't get up. Whatever you do is the right choice. It's your choice. Own it, have peace with it. Same thing with every decision in life. Every decision, if you've done the best you can to have the information that you need to make a good choice, live with your choice. Choose it, stop worrying, have peace. If it turns out it's a bad choice, make whatever adjustments you can make, if there are any. If not, just have peace with it. Hey, I made a choice. Look, if you've ever been an entrepreneur, and I've got those T-shirts by the dozens, okay? By T-shirts, I mean, they often don't go well. And you don't beat yourself up and say, what a loser I am because I started a business that didn't work. You say, oh, I have peace with that. I learned some things. Maybe I'll try something else. Maybe that'll work. You know, there's story upon story about people that tried things that didn't work, and then until finally they did, and we wouldn't have those things available to us if they had given up. But you don't worry about these things. I knew in advance that starting businesses had a high percentage chance of failing. And I said, okay, I accept that risk. That's really what you're accepting, a risk. There is a risk in doing chemo. There's a risk in not doing chemo. You have to make a decision. But once you make the decision, own it. If it goes badly, that doesn't mean the other choice would have worked, by the way. So own that. Don't have a depressed reaction because it didn't work. Whichever choice. You can go the naturopathic way and it not work, and then you regret that you didn't do the chemo. Have your peace that you're going to let the cards play as they play, so to speak, and let the game play out, and it will result as it results because you made the best choice you made. Own the choice. Own your decision. It's why you're here, to make decisions. Okay? And not all your decisions are going to work. Some of them are going to go badly. Hopefully they don't go tragically badly, but some of them are going to go badly. That's life. You read in this book, a lot of people made some really dumb decisions that went pretty badly. And they went bad. They didn't go well. Some of them learned from their mistakes and made better decisions later. Some of them didn't. All right, next question.
Next one is from Olivia and Janet Hoffman. Expanding on 33, I'm thinking verse 33, would you help us with practical ways to deal with worrying on a consistent daily basis? We love your life coaching advice.
I like doing the life coaching stuff. Seek first his kingdom. So what does it mean? So make sure that in your daily activities, you're putting him first in your thoughts. You're making sure that you're vertically connected. This is the idea of pray always. You know, she's talking about verse 33 here, but seek first the kingdom in chapter 6 of Matthew. The praying always. It's not like you're literally babbling, as he said earlier in the chapter. No, it's about being vertically aware always. Because prayer is a communication vertically. So be in communication, be in an awareness always. Deuteronomy chapter 6 talks about having these things be as frontlets before your eyes and bound in your hands and in your walk and all these other things. So, I mean, have it be something that is highly, let me rephrase that. Have it be something that is in a high level of your awareness, that it takes a high level, a high place in your awareness. So what do you do to do that? How do you do that in a practical way? There's lots of things that you can do that. If you're the guys, you have seat on. When you put them on every day, let that be a way to say, okay, this is to remind me to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Find your own habits you can develop that will give you those triggers to do that on a regular basis. Write it down on a card. Write down verse 33 on a little something, carry it around with you, look at it all the time. Okay? Just write it down as a question. Am I seeking first the reign of Elohim and his righteousness? Set it as a goal in the morning. Wake up in the morning and have something put it on the mirror in your bathroom or whatever that just says, today I'm going to make sure that I spend my day seeking first his kingdom and his righteousness. Then at night you come back and guess what? You end up in the bathroom again before you go to bed and you'll see it again. You can ask the question, did I do that all day? Did I spend my day doing that? These are all personal development, tools that we have. You can have a little checklist card that you check off. We talk about the 7x7 card in other teachings, and you can have that as one of your 7 items that on a daily basis that you can, see if you were vertically aware most of the time. We have so many things in life distracting us. It's so hard to stay vertically aware, but you need to stay vertically aware. Okay? All right, next.
All right. Next question comes from, I love this username, Tony, a work in progress. Rabbi, when we know ahead of time that things are going to go wrong and we prepare, are we still to expect that even with proper planning, Yah may still derail those plans and keep us in the trials?
Look, you have to have, as I said to the other question about chemo, you have to do the best you can, the most you can, whatever it is, and then have peace that it either will or will not work in the situation that you're dealing with. And even if what you did wasn't the right thing, he may still give you the result you were hoping for, in spite of the fact that you were doing it in a foolish way. Or you could do everything right and it still not work because he wants you to learn something else from it. So it can go either way. You need to just have peace that you did the right thing for the right reasons regardless. That over time it's going to ultimately get you the right results. Even if it does not always work. Okay? And this is the key. This is the key. All right. I'll give you an example. Let me give you some competitive examples. All right. This comes in sports and other types of competitive endeavors. If you're playing chess, for example, there are certain strategies and certain layouts on the board that will give you a high percentage of success, and you will go forward with that. Doesn't mean that it will always work. But if you do it over time, you'll win more than you'll lose. Same thing like, for example, in baseball, there's certain strategies to do if the score is this and you've got this many outs and this guy's on base that you try to bunt or you try to something because over time the percentages work in your favor. It may not work every time. In football, the same thing, that there is times where you go for 2 points because it's to your advantage and rather than going for 1 point. Or there's times where you try the onside kick because over time the percentages are that it would work you look at the situation and you do what you have thought and figured out would give you the highest likelihood of success if you were to do this over time, every time this kind of a choice came up. That doesn't mean it will always work. In other words, get you the result you were hoping for. But it was still the right choice. And so don't always judge your choice based on the immediate fruit of it. That's kind of what I needed to kind of get across. Just recognize that. This is done in all statistical related things. It doesn't always work, but it will work more than that it won't work, so it's probably the right thing to do. And that's kind of where the chemo naturopathic choice comes at. Some things that maybe they want you to do chemo for would be perfectly all right because of the percentages of something else working, and so other things, the other thing, it's too far along and there's nothing that's going to work that way. And so and actually if you're at that point, the chemo may not work either, just may buy you a little bit of time, whatever it is. It's just no telling. I know people that have had chemo and it went beautifully and they were able to recover and move forward. And other people, it destroyed their immune systems and they ended up in worse situations than before. There's no guarantees that every decision is going to get you a quote unquote desired result. Okay, the result that you want. But you do the best you can with it. Okay, next question.
Okay, Anonymous wants to know, Or she says, I find myself often using the energy level of alertness that comes with worry or anxiety to put toward doing something that will fix the problem or make a backup plan. Is it appropriate to use that feeling in a constructive fashion, or should we try to suppress it altogether?
No, I think I addressed that in the teaching. I think that, worry is not a problem as a thought. Don't suppress the thought. It's a thought that reminds you that there may be a potential threat or potential negative or adverse consequence happening or situation about to happen. So that's good, because you could, often enough, because you had that thought, do something to mitigate the problem before it happens. Like the person who wrote that question and says that they make adjustments, they make a plan B, whatever they have to do. And so that's good. Or you make alternate decisions and alternate choices to adjust. So the thought is not bad. Fear is not a bad thought. Worry is not a bad thought. It's whether or not you allow it to change your state of being into someone that is afraid, that is worried. Being afraid as a thought is a good thought, because it may bring something to your awareness that you needed to know. How you handle the thought is what matters, okay? Don't allow it to be changing you to be, it's kind of like if I said to you, knock it off, that's annoying. Well, then you may say, oh, you think I'm an annoying person. No, I don't. I think what you're doing right this second is annoying. Now, that's the same thing with worry, fear, and anything else. It could be a situational thing, it's an event, it's a thought, but does it become your nature? Does it become who and what you are? Because there are some people that have become and embraced being annoying people, and they go out of their way to annoy everybody. There are. You know people like that, or you're one of them. But there's other times where you may be doing something that you did not realize was irritating somebody. And then when it's brought to your attention, maybe not always in a polite way, but at least it's brought to your attention, you can choose to stop doing it. All right? There are others that go out of their way to do those things. And all of you that are doing that, please stop. Okay.
Okay, and actually the last one that I have here is from Olivia Ramirez. How do we test the spirits, especially when trying to make decisions on things and not worry?
Okay, so let's be careful we're not doing this test the spirits thing from a Christian sort of approach, all right? Because a lot of times it has to do with waiting for some sort of a confirmation in your spirit. People will say, I got to check in my spirit. Which spirit? Your spirit? Your spirit's going to have a check in all kinds of things. Don't worry about your spirit. Does he have a check in his spirit about it? Because your spirit doesn't always want to do what his spirit wants to do. So when you're testing things, the best thing to do, if you're not really sure, is to get learned and anointed, appointed counsel. If it's about medicine or a health issue, go find someone you feel is anointed and appointed in the area of medicine, in the area that you're struggling with. If you're dealing with a respiratory issue, you don't want somebody whose expertise is feet, okay? But if you have a foot issue, you don't want someone whose expertise is lungs, okay? You understand? Find someone whose expertise in whatever it is you're dealing with, and then get an abundance of counsel and help make your decision. If it's halachic, if it's about the walk, then you find your anointed, appointed teachers, and you go and ask them the question, and then you don't worry. Okay, so, but don't just pray about it expecting some answer from above, because you've got too many voices in your head that want to pretend they're his voice. And trust me when I tell you, you will and have often struggled, we all do, to separate which voice is which. They're really good at trying to convince you that all three of those voices, yours, Hasatan's, and his, they all want to convince you they're his. So testing the spirits is also talking about looking at the word, seeing what matches. I mean, there's a lot more to that, but in this case, what you're talking about, I'm saying, is get counsel. If you feel like the Ruach is leading you in a direction, check it with, by checking it, I don't mean like internally, I mean check it with someone who might know. Say, Rabbi, I was thinking of this, this, and this. What do you think? Am I off base? If it was a medical thing, go check it with your doctor. If you just have a doctor by default, well, that's your default. That's your fault. Go find somebody that's actually good. Interview people who have had doctors in different places. Don't just happen to get the one that's your first one that popped up. If it's something serious like that, find the expert. Find people that actually have a reputation of knowing what they're doing and have had success in whatever it is that you're struggling with. All right? Is that it, Manning? All right, wonderful. Okay, did anybody else have anything here? Michael? Okay, he didn't say anything important. Okay, so, no. Michael hasn't been here for a while to get on work on the camera, so I get to tease him a little bit. What he was talking about is exactly a really good example. When the 12 went to spy the land, okay, 10 of them had the thought, there's giants, they're big, there's walled cities, there's so many people, and we're just like nothing in their sight. Okay, nothing wrong with that thought. Joshua and Caleb were like, yeah, we saw all that too. So what? Yahweh said, go take it. So we're going to take it. He said, don't worry about that stuff. In other words, their response was, and your point is, a lot of things he's going to ask you to do in this journey are going to look intimidating and challenging. And we're going to probably use that verse you're talking about anyway as we go forward in this, because we're going to deal with, we dealt with worry today. We got a lot more to deal with worry here a little bit. We're going to deal with the idea of being afraid. So I'm taking some of those key words, and we're going to look at those issues about being afraid. So we may end up there, but we're talking about it now, so we may not. But see, the thought and recognition that something was going to be a potential threat is not the problem. The response to it is the problem. Yahweh specifically told them, you are going to go into this place, and it's going to be given to you, and I'm going to go before you. I'm going to handle all of the enemies, all of the problems. Don't worry about anything. By the way, we can take this into husbands and wives and parents with children. You know, my children will come to me sometimes, and I'll say to them, stop worrying about it. I got it. It's covered. It's fine. But I told you I'll handle it. It's fine. It's taken care of. As I'm in the role of Elohim with them, and I tell them, you are safe. It's covered. Don't worry about it. Same thing with a wife. If you are a husband, you need to be able to help your wife, and you better be meaning this when you say it, though. Help them to understand. You gave it to me. I've got it under control. You can release the worry now. Thank you for bringing it to my attention, letting me know that that's the problem, that you're afraid of an adverse thing happening at some point, so you're worried about it. And then you as the husband say, there's nothing to worry about. I'm aware of it. I'll take care of it. Or say, I'm sorry, honey, there's really nothing we can do about it. That thing is probably going to happen, but this is how we'll get through it. I mean, you can go either way, but either way, you don't have to worry about it. But the husband can say, look, yes, I'm aware of that, thank you, but I recognize that we probably don't have enough time to do anything about it before that happens. So let's prepare for it to happen, and then we'll have to just make it through. But I promise you, as your husband, we'll get through it. I'll make sure we get through it. Because there's two possibilities. You preemptively can do something before it happens, or you just have to accept that it's going to happen, nothing's going to stop it, and then you have to respond to that. But then you take on you the burden of the issue so that they do not need to worry. All right? And so they don't have to have that stress. And that's important. And that's what Abba says. Abba says, yeah, you're going to go into that land. There's going to be all kinds of scary things. There's wild beasts, big walled cities, literally giant people, 9 feet tall, and all this other stuff. That's pretty scary stuff. He said, but you don't need to be afraid of any of that stuff. I just laid waste to Egypt. I parted a sea. What are you worried about? In other words, in your life, what do you think he can't do? I've had that thought with my children. When they were young enough that they would come to me and they would look at me like, oh, but this is going to be so hard. And I look at them like, I laugh. And I was like, not for me. I'm a grown-up. I'm your father. I'm not 5 or whatever it is the child was. I know you can't do it, don't understand, but I can do it. But you kind of chuckle and look at them like, why would you think I couldn't handle this? Of course. And I walk over, boom, 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 and it's fixed. They look at me like, wow, how'd you do that? That's the way we are with Yahweh, isn't it? We can't figure out how it's going to get done because we're like the little children. We can't do it. And he's laughing like, it's no big deal for me. I created all this stuff. I flooded the world. I parted the sea. And you're worried about whatever little nonsense is in your life that I can't do it? I resurrect the dead. And you think he can't do something? He may choose not to. Doesn't mean he can't do it, though. Where's your faith, right? This is what Yeshua said in Matthew 6. Ultimately, this comes down to worrying shows that you're lacking faith. And by faith, I think that's where we really have to bring in the emunah, understanding what faith is all about, belief is all about. It's that full trust that he's got it all under control. That doesn't mean because he has it under control, nothing bad will happen. That's part of where I think our emotional confusion. We think if he's got it under control, that means nothing bad will happen. No, it just means that no matter what happens, ultimately good things will come out of it. No matter how bad and ugly it looks, it ultimately will bring something good that you can't see. Even though you can't see it. Amen? Amen. Okay, so that'll close that up. I really appreciate the opportunity to share today. This stuff is really important. I think that it's really a great subject matter for us to be going through, this idea of peace and the understanding that this is a world not his at the moment. He made it, but he's allowing different authority and sovereignty to rule in this world. But we can choose to allow him to rule in our personal world. And that's where we can have the peace that goes beyond understanding. When it says beyond understanding, not only beyond our understanding, because we should understand that peace now, but it goes beyond everybody else's. They won't understand why how could you have peace? Why do you have peace when this is all horrible? Because I have the peace that he gave me. He says, my peace I give to you. I accept that peace. The only way to accept it, though, is to put him back on the throne, put him up on the throne in authority. Otherwise, you're rejecting the peace that you could have. Amen?